4 years ago, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris promised to take apart everything that President Trump did, thinking not so much about issues and how they would affect real people, but more about a way to put their own stamp on running Mr. Trump out of the White House. Problem was, a lot of what Donald Trump had done was actually working. Interest rates were low, gas and home heating oil was cheap, foreign enemies thought twice before messing with us or even our allies. Productivity was up, small business was thriving with less regulations. American companies that had set up factories overseas were finally coming home. Jobs were open, salaries decent, mortgages were very affordable, and the fireworks on the 4th of July blossomed from coast to coast. I've asked myself many times, how could so much that worked so well get shut down in such a short time? But it did. So here we are, where Republicans knew that Joe Biden was not up to another 4 years, but it took the Democrat Party ganging up on him after a stumbling, unsettling live debate before they actually sent him packing for Delaware. Even as they did, some of those same Democrats spoke openly of how Kamala Harris just wouldn't be a worthy replacement. Then they figured out they couldn't displace a woman, especially one with a mixed race background. So what did they do? They changed their song sheet, and all of a sudden, with the media on their side, Kamala Harris was the best thing going. And now the media is doubling down after Harris added an even more liberal person to her ticket to be her vice president, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. It's August already. We're down to 90 days before we choose the person for what is easily the most important job in all the world. Donald Trump took a bullet already as he stood wide out in the Pennsylvania countryside, riffing as he does about the way things could be again if he's elected. Kamala Harris, for now on teleprompter and only teleprompter, is safely tucked inside behind some new help, veteran operatives who are sketching out for her and her vice presidential pick what to do in the months ahead. None of this is going to be easy, and it's likely that with social media fanning the flames, the economy at an absolute tipping point, and foreign enemies settling their sights on us and our allies, you might want to get a dose of this each day to help figure out who's got the best plan for you and your family. And quite frankly, isn't that what it's all about? Not what's best for somebody else or some other country. It's what's best for you and your family. Now, there's always a lot of talk about the candidates' personalities, more so than policies, but it's the policies and the plans for our future. That's what's going to make or break where this country goes next. The choice now is going to be quite clear. To help you through it, we've had a handful of veteran journalists on board, the old-fashioned kind, who dig for facts and report what they find. One who we trust has popped up right next to me, David Drucker, the senior writer and author at The Dispatch. I've followed you at Roll Call, The Washington Examiner, now The Dispatch, and delighted to have your insights, especially in light of a big piece of news this week, the selection of a running mate for Kamala Harris. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, I don't think anybody would doubt that he is, let's just say a little left of center. Enough so that he's made Bernie Sanders happy, made AOC happy. But it's interesting, Nancy Pelosi says he's a Midwesterner and he's right down the middle. I don't know that I believe that, but what's your assessment of Tim Walz? Is he a mainstream down-the-middle Democrat, or is he really as left of center as Bernie Sanders and AOC?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at a governor. Stylistically, he is moderate and very Midwestern. I say stylistically. He's an avid outdoorsman. He speaks in plain-spoken language. And so he knows how to identify with your average voter in the heartland. It's why he's been successful in his political career, beginning in a rather conservative rural Minnesota district, southern Minnesota, and then advancing into the governor's office. Now, legislatively, as a matter of policy, his record is quite liberal. Whether it's granting illegal immigrants driver's licenses in Minnesota, or raising taxes, or approving of legislation that made it easier for children to obtain gender affirming care, or if they identify different than the sex they were born, able to get medical care that might help them in that direction. all of those things are decidedly left of center, decidedly liberal versus center left. But I think Democrats are very happy with him because they were worried that with Josh Shapiro, who's a very able and up and coming rising Democratic star, who gives one of the best stump speeches I have seen in a long time, that you would have had two coastal lawyers, Kamala Harris, the vice president from San Francisco, Josh Shapiro, who hails from Philadelphia, and that the contrast with the Trump campaign with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance would not have been optimal. And so I think that's when you talk to Democrats, as I was talking to them all day yesterday after the vice president unveiled her selection of Walz to be her running mate. And I said, why is Walz better than Shapiro? Or why are you comfortable with Walz, even though it wasn't Shapiro who's so popular with swing voters in Pennsylvania, possibly the most pivotal state in the race? They were telling me, just look at the guy and watch the guy. He looks and sounds like an everyman. And that is going to do us wonders in these really tight races, not just in Pennsylvania, but Michigan, Wisconsin, rural Georgia, the parts of Arizona and Nevada. And so that's where they're coming from when they talk about him as not a lefty. It's how they feel he plays, even though, you look at the voting record or you look at his legislative record as governor, the bills he signed into law. And Republicans have a great case to make there that you're dealing with somebody that's just as liberal as Kamala Harris, if not more so.
Yeah, I think you've made a great point that stylistically he comes across as, I'm the guy that's wearing a camo hat. I'm just a good old guy. But it's also important to know that at some point he's going to have to answer for some of these legislative bills he's passed, some of which aren't going to go over real well in rural Georgia. Abortion up to the moment of birth, the idea of taking children away from their parents if they don't affirm the transgender surgery that their kid says they want when they're 12 years old. I mean, those are hard sells in middle America, southern America, and I think in some places, even in maybe left of center America, that's a pretty radical viewpoint. Will he be able to somehow give the all shucks, I'm just a good old guy, and run away from his record? It was hard for me to understand why they passed over Josh Shapiro for two reasons. One, he is Jewish. Maybe that was why they passed over him. But they've got some real fence mending to do, the Democrats do, with the Jewish voters, which has been a very reliable source of votes for them. But the second reason, Pennsylvania is very much in play. It's a critical state. They've got to win it in order to get the electoral votes. Minnesota, probably not even in play. It's the only state in the entire country that Ronald Reagan didn't carry in his landslide of 1984. So it has become increasingly, reliably, almost undeniably blue. When you talk to Democrats, as you did all day yesterday, did they think of that? Was that an issue or concern for them at all?
This is one of the questions I asked, Governor, and they were open in discussing it. Look, what they told me was that, number one, if you look at Governor Walz's record as a congressman for a dozen years as it relates to Israel, it's a solid record. After October 7th, I believe he lowered the flags in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, to half staff. So his record on Israel is not what the anti-Israel, sometimes a very anti-Semitic left flank of the Democratic Party would hope it would be, even though they are more hopeful with him than they would have been with Josh Shapiro. His record on Israel, they tell me, Democrats, is good. Look, Kamala Harris also is married to a Jew, and they feel that in combination, she's inoculated from charges that the decision with Josh Shapiro had anything to do with the party's anti-Semitism on its, very left-wing flank.
David Drucker, grateful to you for coming. Thrilled to have you back, and we look forward to seeing you again before the election. The economy is uncertain. You never know whether your money's worth as much today as it was yesterday. It's one of the reasons I buy gold from American Hartford Gold. American Hartford Gold has earned a 5-star rating and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Be sure to tell them Mike Huckabee sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. Call 844-417-1010 or text Mike to 998899. You'll be glad you did business with American Hartford Gold.